Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a man who stands very still in the dark. There is a particular kind of silence that lives inside old buildings. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of a room that has never been filled, but the silence of a place that has held too many people, too many voices, too many footsteps, and has simply grown used to the absence of them. It's a dense silence, a considered one, the kind that settles into the mortar between bricks and stays there, accumulating over decades, until the building itself seems to breathe it in and out, like something slow and patient and alive. Simon knew this silence well. He had worked evening security at the Alderman Gallery for just over 2 years, 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. The gallery occupied a converted Victorian warehouse in the old merchant quarter, a building that had been, at various points in its life, a textile mill, a cold storage facility, a failed nightclub, and now this. A space of polished concrete and exposed brick and carefully considered light, where art hung on white walls, and people moved through it in hushed pairs. Speaking in that particular register, people use when they want to sound thoughtful. After closing, when the last visitor had gone, and the front desk staff had gathered their things and said their good nights, the gallery became something else entirely. It became his. Simon did his first circuit at 8 o'clock. Every 40 minutes after that, he would walk the full route. 7 rooms, a service corridor, the loading bay at the back, then up the iron staircase to the mezzanine, and back down again. He knew each room the way you know a familiar road, not by thinking about it, but by the particular feel of the floor beneath his feet, the way the air changed temperature between spaces, the sound of his own footsteps shifting from the soft absorption of carpet to the bright click of concrete and back again. He liked the work. He liked the stillness of it. He liked being the only moving thing in a building full of things that did not move. He thought about that sometimes on his late circuits. The paintings, the sculptures, the carefully lit objects sealed behind glass, all of them waiting in the dark between his visits, patient and unchanged, exactly where he had left them. That had always been true until the acquisition. It arrived on a Wednesday. Simon was not on duty that day, but he heard about it the following evening from the assistant curator, a young woman named Petra, who spoke about new pieces with a specific kind of controlled excitement. The way people do when they have strong feelings they have been professionally trained to moderate. "It's quite something," she said, pulling on her coat at the front desk. "Room 3. You'll see it on your circuit. It's quite something." She left without elaborating. Simon started his first circuit at 8. He moved through rooms 1 and 2 without hurrying, pausing as he always did to sweep his torch across the corners, to check the emergency exits, to listen to the building settle around him. He was not thinking about the sculpture. He was thinking about the coffee he had left cooling on his desk, and whether the leak above the service corridor had been looked at yet, and whether it would rain on his walk home. He pushed open the door to room 3. The track lighting in each room was left on a low setting overnight, not full brightness, but enough to see clearly, a warm amber half-light that caught the edges of things and left their centers in soft shadow. Room 3 was a medium-sized space, roughly square, with a high ceiling and a single wide window on the far wall that had been painted over in matte white to diffuse the light during the day. In the center of the room, the sculpture stood. It was life-size. A man, or the figure of one, in a long coat that fell to mid-calf, the fabric rendered in some dark resin that caught the amber light in thin, uneven lines. The face was tilted slightly downward, so that you could not quite see the features straight on. The hands were at the sides, loose, not quite open, and not quite closed. The posture was entirely neutral, neither relaxed nor tense, neither waiting nor departing. It was the posture of someone standing the way people stand when they are not thinking about standing. Simon stood in the doorway and looked at it for a moment. "Quite something," he said to no one. He finished his circuit. He went back to his desk. He drank his cold coffee and read for a while and did not think about the sculpture again. At 20 minutes to 10, he started his second circuit. Rooms 1 and 2. The service corridor. The loading bay. The iron staircase with its particular hollow ring beneath his feet. The sound traveling up through the metal in a way that always made him feel slightly exposed, as though the sound were announcing him. The mezzanine, with its 3 smaller works, lit by individual spots. Then back down, through the connecting passage, and into room 3. Simon stopped. The sculpture was against the far wall. He stood very still in the doorway and looked at it. The same figure, the same long coat, the same slightly bowed head, the same loose hands at its sides. Everything exactly the same, except that it was no longer in the center of the room. It was pressed against the far wall, close to the painted-over window, as though it had moved there quietly, while no one was watching, and simply stopped. Simon stayed in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked slowly around the perimeter of the room, keeping the sculpture in his peripheral vision, checking the corners, the skirting, the floor around the piece. There were no marks on the concrete, no scuffs, no drag lines, no indication that anything heavy had been moved recently. The figure stood with the same composed blankness it had held before, the same slight downward tilt of the face, the same hands loose at its sides. He told himself someone had moved it. The installation team, perhaps, or Petra, adjusting the placement before the weekend opening. People moved sculptures. That was the thing that happened. He made a note in his log. Sculpture in room 3, repositioned. Will query with staff. And continued his circuit. But when he returned to his desk, he opened the CCTV interface. The gallery had 12 cameras. Room 3 had 2, one fixed on the main wall opposite the entrance, one covering the rear quadrant with the window. Simon pulled up the footage from the last 2 hours and sat back in his chair and watched. The sculpture stood in the center of the room. It stood there for the full duration of the recording. No one entered. No one moved it. The amber half-light held steady. The figure remained exactly where it was, in the center of the room, head slightly bowed, hands at its sides. Until the footage ended at the exact moment Simon had walked through the door on his second circuit. And then, in room 3, the sculpture was against the wall. He watched the footage 3 times. Then he watched it 4 more. He told himself there was a technical explanation, a gap in the recording, a camera glitch, an edit he wasn't seeing. He told himself that things did not move on their own, that physics was a reliable system, that the building was old and strange, but it was still a building, and sculptures were objects, and objects stayed where you put them. He went back to his reading. He did not look at the CCTV for the rest of the shift. At 11:20, he started his 3rd circuit. He moved through the building the way he always moved through it. Not slowly, not quickly, with the particular unhurried pace of someone who has walked a route enough times that the route walks itself. He did not rush toward room 3. He did not avoid it. He simply walked his circuit, and his circuit brought him there. He pushed open the door. The sculpture was in the doorway, not in the center of the room, not against the wall. In the doorway, which is to say, in the space Simon was currently occupying, the space he had just stepped into, so that he was suddenly closer to the figure than he had been at any point before. Close enough to see the texture of the coat in detail, the way the resin had been worked to suggest folds and creases and the particular weight of heavy fabric. Close enough to see the grain of the face, the slight asymmetry of the features, the way the downward tilt of the head made it almost possible to imagine, in the amber half-light, that the eyes were not closed, but only averted. Simon did not move. He was aware, in that moment, of several things simultaneously: the sound of his own breathing, the faint hum of the track lighting, a frequency so constant he had stopped hearing it years ago, and now suddenly heard again. The weight of the torch in his hand, the slight cold of its casing, the texture of the floor beneath his feet. He was aware, also, of the sculpture, of the fact that it was very still. He had spent 2 years working in this building. He had walked past hundreds of artworks in the dark. He had, in that time, developed a tolerance, if not quite a comfort, with the quality of stillness that inanimate things possess. The particular non-presence of them, the way they occupied space without inhabiting it. This felt different. This felt like the stillness of something that was capable of movement, like the stillness of a held breath, like the stillness of something that had stopped, very recently, just before you arrived. Simon took 1 step back. The sculpture did not move. He took another step, and another, and then he was in the corridor with the door still open behind him, the amber light of room 3 falling in a long, narrow rectangle across the concrete floor. He stood in that light for a moment, his back against the corridor wall, and looked at the figure silhouetted in the doorway. It had not moved. It was simply standing there, head slightly bowed, hands at its sides, the way it had always been, standing. He went back to his desk. He opened the CCTV interface. He pulled up the room 3 footage. He watched it from the beginning of the shift, from 8 o'clock, all the way through to the present moment. An hour and 40 minutes of footage, from 2 angles. The sculpture never moved. In the footage, it stood in the center of the room at 8 o'clock. And then, without any visible transition, without any blur or skip or anomaly that Simon could identify, frame by frame, over 17 viewings. It was against the wall, and then it was in the doorway. And it had not moved to get there. It was simply on camera in one place and then in another, with nothing in between. 17 times Simon watched the footage. He is not sure why he kept watching. Perhaps because the alternative, accepting what the footage showed and sitting with what it implied, required a rearrangement of something fundamental that he was not ready to perform. It is easier, sometimes, to keep looking for the explanation than to stop and acknowledge that the explanation may not be the kind you were looking for. At 1:45, he made his final circuit of the night. He moved through rooms 1 and 2. He moved through the service corridor, past the leak that had still not been looked at. The faint smell of damp old brick that had become as familiar to him as the smell of his own coat. He moved through the loading bay and up the iron staircase and across the mezzanine. And then he came back down, and he stood outside the door to room 3. He stood there for a long time. The gallery was very quiet around him. The building breathed its old, patient silence. Somewhere above him, the roof shifted slightly, the particular sound of Victorian ironwork cooling in the night air. A sound he knew so well, it had long since ceased to register as anything other than background. The track lighting hummed its single, unwavering note. He thought about the footage. He thought about the center of the room, and the far wall, and the doorway. He thought about the fact that he had watched 17 minutes of video and found nothing. No movement. No anomaly. No frame where one thing became another. He thought about Petra saying it was quite something, and the way she had left quickly and had not looked back. And then he thought about something else. He thought about the fact that the footage showed where the sculpture was when he was not looking at it, and what the footage did not, could not show was where it was when he was. He pushed open the door. Room 3 was empty. The amber half-light held the space evenly. The polished concrete, the white walls, the painted-over window at the far end. The track lighting hummed. The room was still and warm and entirely, completely empty. No sculpture in the center. No sculpture against the wall. No sculpture in the doorway behind him, or in the corners, or anywhere that he could see. Simon stood in the middle of the room. He turned around slowly, 360 degrees, the torch sweeping the walls, the corners, the high ceiling. Nothing. The room was as empty as a room can be. The careful empty of a space prepared for something, waiting for something, holding its breath until the thing arrives. He stood there for a while, in the center of it. He is not sure, afterward, exactly how long. He did not look behind him on the way out. He has thought about this since. Whether it was a failure of nerve or a decision, he can't quite say. There is a difference, he thinks, between not looking because you are afraid of what you will see, and not looking because some part of you already knows and has quietly decided that knowing and seeing are not always the same thing, and that some distances are better left unmeasured. The sculpture was back in its place the following morning. Petra mentioned it to him when he came in that evening for his next shift. Back in the center of room 3, just where it had been when it arrived. She said, as if it had always been there. The installation team must have had a final adjustment to make. Simon nodded. He wrote nothing in his log. He still works at the Alderman Gallery. He still does his circuits every 40 minutes, still moves through the 7 rooms and the service corridor, and the loading bay, and the mezzanine, still knows the building by the feel of it beneath his feet. He does his circuits a little faster now, perhaps. He does not linger in doorways, and when he reaches room 3, he opens the door fully, all the way back against the wall, before he steps inside. Just to be sure, the sculpture stands in the center of the room, head slightly bowed, hands loose at its sides. It stands exactly where they say it stands. It is exactly where the camera shows it. Simon does not look at it directly. Not anymore. He has found, in the months since, that peripheral vision is enough, that he can track the figure from the corner of his eye as he moves around the room, can confirm it is where it should be, can do what he needs to do, and leave. He has found, also, that looking directly at it, really looking, the way you look at a thing you want to understand, produces a feeling he cannot quite name. Not fear, exactly. More like the feeling of standing at the edge of a very high place, and understanding, in your body rather than your mind, exactly what is below you. He does not need to understand it. He just needs to know where it is, and he does. He always does, as long as he is looking. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the stillest things carry a story. If this stillness stayed with you, if the hum of those lights settled somewhere deep, then let it remain a little while longer. Some things, after all, are only still because you are watching. Rest now, and try not to look away.